Accept on your end.
All right, accepted.
All right. Well, here we are.
Yeah,
Andre Kennebrew
yeah,
on the Leader Farming podcast. Man, it is such an honor to have you here. And I can only say that I am just, well, as I mentioned just a second ago, super honored, but I'm humbled. I'm grateful. It's your story and our lives and how they've intersected over the years have just impacted me in so many ways, and I'm just incredibly grateful and incredibly thankful to have you here. And so I want to give you the floor, just an opportunity to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you've done, what you're doing now, and then we'll talk a little bit about how our lives have intersected and
yeah,
crossed paths. So
yeah.
go for
I
it.
use Zach. I usually tell my story from forward to backwards, but this time I'm gonna do it backwards. But likewise, Zach, I am honored to be with you. You are God's man. That's the first thing I would say about you is you love Jesus and you show it. You're a great husband. You're a great father. You represent everything that Truett wanted and somebody he wanted to go in business with. And not only that, you served your military, you served in the military, you served your country, and the amount of people that you've impacted just in your life, and it's been incredible. So I'm as honored as you are to be with you. I'm currently here sitting in my office at Life Shape, and Life Shape is in the Chick-fil-A Support Center. Life Shape is an organization here that's part of the Kathy Family Ministry, where we focus on having operators, franchise operators and staff serve on various projects, whether it be global water, human trafficking, um, children at risk, just a lot of issues in the world. And we have the pleasure of inviting operators and staff to go on trips. I just came back from Brazil a couple of weeks ago where we ministered to pastors and churches there and we taught leadership model. And it's just wonderful to travel the world and see people and see God's work everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Kenya twice, God is there. I've been to Belarus, God is there. I've been to Brazil, God is there. I've been down the Mississippi Delta. God is so everywhere doing so many amazing things. So it's just a wonderful thing to know that God, after 62 years of life, has brought me to a place where I can see more of his goodness. Before Life Shape, I spent 15 years at Chick-fil-A, most of it doing selection. Started out doing operator selection and then doing staff selection. And I try not to use these numbers, but I just try to give people kind of an idea. I think, and I counted one time, that I've done over 8,000 interviews at Chick-fil-A
Wow.
in my career. And as I look back and I look at interim manager selections, LDP, TDP, staff selections, been involved in about 1,000 decisions, positive decisions to bring people into Chick-fil-A. And the great pleasure I have is seeing these folks grow, spending time with folks like you, Zach, and people that we talk about all the time, like Michael Galloway, who started off working in your restaurant, became an operator, and now he's a director on staff. Talking about Erica Hartfield, who started your restaurant, has a second restaurant in California. Yamara, who's opened up a freestanding restaurant in Houston. Who does that? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and there's others, but just a great pleasure just seeing people grow, not only as business leaders and employees of Chick-fil-A team members, but just as people, husbands, wives, children. One of my greatest things I've been able to do at Chick-fil-A is I probably have about 15, 16 Chick-fil-A weddings I've officiated.
Mm.
So I keep my pictures around of those folks. And, I love the relationships and I just love the fact that I've had an opportunity to meet so many great people. People ask me all the time, why do I like Chick-fil-A? I said the two P's, the purpose, glorify God by being faithful stewards of all that's entrusted to us, have a positive impact on everyone that we come in contact with, and then the people like yourself,
Mm-hmm.
Zach, and these three people because you developed them that I just mentioned, just great people. And so, yeah. And so before Chick-fil-A, I was in ministry. I went to seminary and thought I wanted to be a pastor. Spent 4.5 years working for a church, and decided God wanted me to be a marketplace pastor. And that has come true as I look back over my time, as I look at Chick-fil-A, as I just explained. And then before that, I was in banking. And I spent 15 years in banking, and before that in retail. And before that, I was a college athlete. And it's interesting that the NBA playoffs are here, because I tell the story that no Andre Kennebrew, no Stephen Curry, who plays for Golden State. And so in 1978, I went to Davidson College, which is where Steph Curry just graduated from after playing there for 3 years and going to the pros early. He finally got his degree. But I went to Davidson College at the time when they were recruiting African-American athletes for the first time in football and basketball. So sort of a pioneer there with that. And then grew up in Columbus, Georgia. My dad was a military guy. Zach, you're very familiar with Columbus.
Yes, sir.
Home of the Rangers school. And my dad was there. He retired when I was 13 or so and lived there. And so that's the backward story. I usually tell it the other way around. My dad was so military, Zach, and you know this. He was like a drill sergeant. I tell people, I still make my bed up even when I'm in a hotel. I mean, an unmade bed is a sign of undisciplined, being undisciplined. And so since 6 years of age and to now 62, my bed has to be made up first thing when I get out of it. And so, and made right too. I mean, with no creases in it. So that's still in my DNA as well.
I understand that, but for me, it's hard to make my bed up when my wife's still in it. So
I get it, man.
She wouldn't be happy if I tucked the
know.
corners in while she's still in it.
I know it probably drives you crazy though.
It does. It does. Yes, sir. Wow. Well, that's an incredible story. I learned some things that I didn't know about you, and so I certainly appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about our journey and how we met and started interacting. And you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our first interaction was you reached out to me at some point and said, and I don't think you really knew me at the time, but you just said, "Hey, I think I want to do some in-field interviews in your restaurant."
Yep.
And you came and you sat down in the back left corner back there toward the restrooms and just brought a bunch of people in. And I remember the one thing I remember very distinctly about that time and that day was, I was there kind of popping in and out and just really interested in hearing your perspective on these interviews. And you were interviewing somebody. I don't remember who it was, but I kept jumping up and going and taking care of things or whatever. And you just stopped the interview and you looked at this candidate across the table and you said, "You see that right there?" You said that restlessness.
Yes.
That's what, we're looking for.
Yes.
And then at the time I brought on board Michael Calloway, which you mentioned a few minutes ago. And I said, "You got to meet this guy." And so, the rest is history. I'll let you take it from there, just from your perspective on some of our interactions and the candidates that you helped me cultivate and ultimately select and are now operators. And we kind of had this unspoken mission together too, which I'll let you talk a little bit about that as well. I remember you told me something to the effect of, most operators like you, their staff look like them, and you're different. And you said something to that effect. And so I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, I'll talk on both of those. And first of all, I'll talk about the restlessness I saw. When Kathy first, created, the opportunity for operators. I mean, he was in the restaurant. We're in the restaurant business, so he should be in the restaurant. And what I saw in a lot of candidates were they want to be operators, and they thought that they were the ones who got to stand and look in and watch everybody work, because they thought, wow, if I get a good leader or somebody in my restaurant, then I'll just do the paperwork and that kind of stuff. And I'd oftentimes explain to people that that's not how it works. That you work in the restaurant. I mean, you're in the
Mm-hmm.
restaurant. You're not necessarily making drinks and that kind of stuff, but you have this ability to kind of see things before they're going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
so that restlessness that I saw in you was like seeing things before they were going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I also saw you engaging with your folks as well. And a lot of leaders don't engage with their folks. And so when you go back and you think about being a great leader, one of the things is that a leader sees things before others do, but they also see things in others before they see it in themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was trying to relate to this person is there's always this continuous improvement. There's always this restlessness. There's always this need to get better. There's always this need to push the envelope to get things done. And sitting down and drinking coffee and just sitting there and just letting things go is not how this whole thing works. And so I wanted them to understand what you were doing, what you were thinking, that you were getting ahead of things before they were really getting out of hand and that kind of stuff. And then
That's
on the
good.
other thing, you and I began earlier to talk about diversity. We talked about diversity long before anybody at Chick-fil-A was talking about diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want you to go back and think about that. I'm like, I need an operator that will really, really focus on diversity, because at the end of the day, if we're going to select more diverse folks, we got to get them in the restaurant business, and we got to get them working in the restaurant business, and we got to develop them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the three people I mentioned earlier is interesting. They're all diverse candidates in their own different way. Michael Galloway is a Black male, Erica's a Black female, and Yamara was a Muslim and
Pakistan.
from Pakistan. I
Yeah.
mean, so how diverse is that?
Mm-hmm.
And the incredible thing I saw is the incredible connection you made with them. I mean, these folks trusted you. Michael Galloway and Erica were both working other jobs, and they
Mm-hmm.
trusted you enough to come work with you in order to get the dream. And that doesn't happen very often, or as often as it should at Chick-fil-A, that somebody having experience with an operator. I'm talking about a diverse candidate having experience with an operator that says, hey, I'm willing to trust you enough to get on this path and to dedicate myself in wholly. And then Yamara, just, helping her with her journey.
Mm.
Here's a young lady, you and I both know that, when she decided to become a Christian, I mean, that was really difficult for her in her family.
Yes,
And
sir.
so again, that influence, I mean, like, God, what is it? And I think about Truett Cathy and just how many people he had a positive influence on. I mean, just so many. Just interaction with him was like, I think I want to change what I'm doing. I think I want to
Mm.
change my life. And I've seen this happen with many operators where people are going down a direction and they either choose to go like, I'm going to change my profession and do this. And that's one way. And that's the one people can easily see. But when people say, I want to change my life and do this, that's a whole nother exchange.
Mm.
And so I saw that, and that was very interesting to me to see that. I've worked with young people before who said, Andre, I just want you to help me get what I want. And then when I get what I want, then I'm done. And
Mm.
then I work with young people that like they really changed. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they like changed. They weren't the same people that were like, they were different people. They were better spouses. They were better, just people overall. And that's what ultimately I think Truett's been after through all this
Mm-hmm.
journey is if I put these great men and women in these restaurants and they serve great chicken and they make a profit, the impact on them, on their daily impact of them day in and day out in a restaurant will change people. And that's what I get excited about when I think about Chick-fil-A. I mean, that gets me going. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I love about
Yeah.
what I do. Ultimately you could do it anywhere, but I think that the platform that we've been given to make a difference in people's lives.
Yeah.
And, I say all the time that we're just a leadership development company that just happens to sell chicken.
That's exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, we're in the people business, and
Absolutely.
absolutely love the opportunity that I have to be a part of some people's journeys, whether it is to become an operator, or I've helped other leaders in my restaurant open their own businesses that have nothing to do with chicken.
Yeah.
And I've helped several
Yeah.
young leaders. One went off to my alma mater, West Point. One went to the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
I've had several go into the Coast Guard and the Marines, and I don't think I've had one in the Air Force, but yeah. So it's just been, cultivating entrepreneurial type leaders.
Yeah.
That's what I do,
Yeah.
and I
You're
love what I
growing.
do.
Yeah. I mean, you're a farmer. I mean, you're literally, when you think about what you're doing in terms of farming, I mean, it's so interesting if you think about farming in this place. And because I think Jesus thought about it this way too. You plant a seed, the seed grows, and then it plants another seed, and then another plant grows, and then it plants another seed.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that whole idea of discipleship. And
Mm-hmm.
that's Jesus spending time with 12, and that 12 turns into whatever. And it was by them spending time with him. And when that happens and you send somebody to West Point and they become a leader, and let's say they become a major colonel general, then that seed is just being thrown,
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And that's literally what Truett has done. He's just thrown a lot of seeds out there. And so
Mm-hmm.
now we're in 47 states where Chick-fil-A brand is, and we're in Puerto Rico, and we're in Toronto, and now the seeds just keep spreading. And not only through Chick-fil-A, but just the people who are doing things. And again, I think about that same thing at Life Shape, just coming back from my Brazil trip and knowing that we spent time with 35, 40 pastors teaching leadership who are going to take that back to their churches in Brazil. That's some serious seed spreading. That's some serious farming going on right there.
Yes,
It's
sir.
difficult sometimes, but we got to keep it going. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you making that connection and that analogy, because that really is what this is about. And when I think about the farming leaders, growing leaders, my brand of leader farming, I say, some farmers grow potatoes, some grow corn. I cultivate leaders,
Yeah.
entrepreneurial leaders. That's what I do.
And they'll have a lot of
Um,
impact, Zach. Leaders have more impact than anyone else, and that's the amazing part of it. They'll have a lot of impact on a lot of people. So
yes, sir. Well,
admire
thank you
you for
again.
that. Admire you for that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So let's switch to another analogy that
Yeah.
you and I have talked about before in the past that relates to farming. And what we've talked about is this idea of a seasonal growth mindset. And that's really what I love to have folks here on the podcast to talk about their perspective as it relates to this seasonal growth mindset. You and I have talked about over the years in the selection process of people having a growth mindset. And I think our world continues to perpetuate this idea that growth means every day has to be better than the day before, from
Mhm.
an external perspective, or
Yeah.
every month your numbers got to be better than the month before, and every year expanding beyond what you did the year before. And it's simply not true when you look at the model that God designed for growth.
Yeah.
And overall, it ends up being true in the long run. But when you have a short-term view of it, and you see, oh well, this particular um, season wasn't as productive, or it didn't look as productive, and then that in turn creates a lot of anxiety
So
for those that are looking at it themselves and saying, well, I didn't perform as good as I did last month, or and so I would love for you to just share an example from your life, whether it be work related or personal, and you
Yeah,
can be as vulnerable as you want to be
yeah,
here, but just from your perspective on a winter season, a season of life that you
yeah,
went through, where from the outside looking in, if everybody saw it, they may say, you know, it's a winter season for Andre. That there's no leaves on the trees. It looks dormant. It looks like it's dying. But on the inside, there's a lot going on, and
yeah,
there's things going on underneath the surface that have um, deepened, character,
yeah,
deepened resolve,
yeah,
deepened resistance, and all of those things that led to future growth and
yeah,
opportunity. And so you take the
yeah,
floor and share with us from your
yeah.
experience of winter season.
Yeah. And Zach, it's kind of hard for me not to preach, being that I'm a preacher. So bear with me here. But every time I think about this, I always think about John 15, where Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman.
Mm,
Every branch of me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. But every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that he may bring more fruit.
mhm,
And that purging that actually takes place is a cutting back.
mhm,
Sometimes when we're growing, there's things growing on the tree that don't need to be growing. And
mhm,
so you cut the limb and you cut back everything so that the really good stuff can grow. Because sometimes there's some weeds in there. I mean, there
mhm,
really is. And so the time I can tell you that I've had the most spiritual growth in my life, which also led to the most professional growth in my life, was that I was in my 30s. And so I have to go back and tell you the first part of this to get you there. I'll start in my 20s and come to the 30s. But my senior year of college, I had one of my best junior football seasons, and looking forward to going to my senior lit season. I mean, I just tremendous junior year. Got home that summer, and my mom shared with us that she had cancer. She probably had cancer about 2 or 3 years, and she never told us.
mm,
And so when we talked to the doctor said she had 6 months to live, and she actually died a week later. And so,
mm,
oh man, I cried every night for a year. My mom was my rock.
mm,
So rather than having this super senior year, I didn't feel like working out. I came back in such bad shape my senior year that we always do like a little workout where you have to take tests, like run certain speeds at certain. I got on the track and I ran and I just stopped running. I just I just was so depressed by where I was and that kind of stuff. So I went through that for a year, came out of it and did really well. But when I was 36 years old, having dealt with the death of a mom, I had another really close death, and that was my older brother.
mm,
My brother was a year and 4 days older than me. And so, typical what happens with most people is when we go through something that's very difficult and we get through it, we think we got it. I got it. This brother, whatever. I've already had my experience of death of my mother, but um, my death of my brother at 37, I was 36, sent me on a real bad spiral that I did not see coming. And
mm,
so I began to have anxiety attacks. My mom had died, my brother died, and my dad had a stroke.
mm,
And so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that I'm not going to make it to 40.
mm,
And so I had a very, very bad panic attack. I'd drive my car and have to pull over because I thought somebody was going to hit me. I drove myself to the emergency room at least twice thinking I was having heart attacks. I mean, I was just so fearful of just, doing anything because I was like, I'm not going to make 40, And during those dark days, this strong guy who was, he was leading things. I was leading PTSA at school. I was a deacon in the church. I was a leader at work, and I was hiding my fear like crazy. And so now I'm fearing that anybody will know that I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved from being afraid of death to fearing that people would think this strong guy is going to be strong. And
Mm-hmm.
it took me to a point where I literally thought I was going crazy. Tough time for my wife. She's going like, what has happened to this strong man who's been strong all our marriage, leading father? He just seems to just be crumbling right in front of me.
Mm.
And I wanted to bring this one up in particular because, 2000, which is 22 years ago, you just didn't talk about mental health.
Mm-mm.
You didn't talk about anxiety. You didn't talk about depression. You didn't talk about any of that stuff. And so for me, I was hiding it. I mean, I was hiding it everywhere I went. And eventually what ended up happening was I went to a Christian counselor. I finally relented and went to a Christian counselor. And he told me about the same situation that he'd had. And he told me about the time that God was taking through a period of what's called brokenness, where you become totally dependent on the Lord. And I'm like, what does that feel like to be totally dependent on the Lord? I found out pretty quick because when you're having an anxiety attack, you just have to let go and go like, whatever. And so as I was going through this period, what I learned, and this is what's coming out of winter and coming in the spring for me, was to depend on the Lord, to depend on the Lord. And
Mm-hmm.
so I just, again, and it was so amazing, Zach, because when I got through the period of going through this, and it took me about a year, and I came out of it, and I finally, began to put the scriptures together, and the fact that it was a purging season for me, where God was taking off some of my confidence in myself. That's why I say you grow things. I was very successful at work. I was very successful. God was just pruning, saying, you think you're doing all this yourself. You think okay, I'm going to show you can't do anything without me. And literally, it came down to that understanding, Lord, you are right, and
Mm.
agreeing with Him. Lord, you are right. I can't do anything without you. And so I got there. And so when I got in the spring and I went back to work, and people were like, there is something so different about you. And they said, what is it? I said, I'm dependent on the Lord. I am filled with the Spirit. Church, they say the same thing. What is wrong with you? You just taught it. And I was like, what? And I said, wow. And I didn't even, and again, it was only because I'd gone through this experience that I knew I was no longer working in my own strength. And I was getting more out of not working in my own strength. And that was a really big turning point for me to go like, this thing about trusting in the Lord and not doing everything in your own strength was real.
Mm.
It was real. And so I yielded so many times. I mean, there was so many times when I go like, Lord, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I always go back to that scripture in Corinthians where Paul said, he had a thorn in his side, and he said, my grace is sufficient for you. I felt my anxiety was my thorn in my side, and God kept it there so that I would never start feeling big about myself again. And it's still a
Mm-hmm.
thorn to a certain degree, not like it was, but
Mm-hmm.
that thorn is a reminder to me to always think um, that. And so spring comes for me very often because I can get into I can get into that when I'm working sometimes, where I'm
Mm-hmm.
starting to feel good about myself and I'm having success and I'm starting to take credit for what God's doing. And He'll send that thorn to remind me, okay, Andre, you're a little bit too big for your britches.
Mm.
You don't want that feeling, that you don't want that full feeling of anxiety that you used to have that used to scare you to death. And I said, no, God, I definitely don't want that anymore.
Right.
So that took me into my spring, and it's been something now for 22 years that oftentimes God brings me back to that. And so uh, that was, man, I'm gonna tell you, my wife will tell you, she's like, I was like, this man, he's been strong. I don't, what's wrong with him? He doesn't want to go anywhere. He doesn't want to do anything. I mean, he's
Mm.
scared of his own shadow.
Mm.
And yeah, and I was. And so now I just, I'm more dependent. I'm just more dependent. So that would be my winter.
Mm.
Yeah, it still comes from time to time. I don't want anybody to think it doesn't come, that you just get over anxiety and things like that. But it was the most probably difficult time of my life. And I had to go back and re-grieve my brother's death because I didn't grieve it well. And, ended up, I'm 62 now, so I did make it to 40. And so I just like, yeah, I made it to 40. My 40th birthday was one of my best birthdays because I was like, I made it, you know.
Yes, sir.
I just knew I wasn't going to make 40. I really, really, uh, didn't think I was going to make it. Okay.
Well, let me say this. I sincerely appreciate you sharing that and your vulnerability and transparency there. You shared with me yesterday as we
Mhm.
talked, just
Mhm.
kind of preparing for today, that you've never shared that in public before.
Never.
And I feel honored that you
Yeah.
chose to share it here. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I
so
and I mean, I think so many people deal with it and hide it because I can kind of recognize it now. I'll
yeah.
tell you the story. Somebody told me this is that when I came here, I was sharing with somebody at Chick-fil-A one time privately about this, and they were sharing with me is that more people at Chick-fil-A by percentage suffer than the national population,
Mm,
which makes sense because this is one of the places where you wouldn't want people to know that you're struggling. And
mm,
when you're in church, when you're a person of position or whatever, you don't want people to know that something's wrong with you. And so
yeah.
you tend to hide it. And so you have to have a perfect life. But none of us have perfect lives. And so when something's not going well in our life, if we're an operator, we're not going to tell our business consultant because that'll keep me from,
Mm,
whatever. Well, if I'm having trouble in staff and I'm trying to get a promotion, I'm not going to tell anybody I'm struggling.
mm-hmm.
That's reality. And so we have to remember that, that, hey, if we're going to be mentally healthy and we're going to support each other and we're going to be a caring company, it's very important for us to remember that caring company has to understand that a lot of the issues that people are going through are mental. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing a higher number of suicides. We're seeing a higher number of a lot of things that we've never seen before. And that's because people don't have the freedom to express some of these things that are going on in their life because they're afraid that they're gonna be found out. And
Yeah.
that's why I chose to talk about it today, because I just know that there's others out there like me who may be going through something like that, but they just are afraid to tell people because they're afraid it's going to impact whether or not they get a restaurant or whether they're going to get a job or a promotion or whatever. And it should be embraced
Mm,
by the person, and it should also be embraced by Chick-fil-A because it's not something that can't be overcome. You know,
yeah.
so
Well, again, thank you for sharing. I know this will be so helpful for
yeah.
so many that are listening. And so just, kind of with that, continue with that thought. Is there any final words that you would like to share to those listeners? We may have two listeners out there, or we may have, 2,000 one day. I don't know. But I do know that my team at Chick-fil-A Rockmart they're listening, and there are others out there listening. And you are a very, very wise man.
Yeah.
You have been through a lot in life, way more than what you had time to share today. And so what is one just key point of wisdom and thought
Mhm.
that you would like to share with those out there listening?
Yeah. So Zach, one of the things that I'm really focused on, I focus on this every morning when I get up, and I literally tell myself, is I have to control my thinking.
Mm,
I have to control my thinking. I mean, there's a scripture that talks about taking your thoughts captive.
mhm,
I try to be so aware of the thoughts that I'm having, and not necessarily like towards someone, but like, what thought am I having that doesn't agree with God,
mm,
what God says? We have thoughts all the time that are inconsistent with what God has said about us. And it's those thoughts that get us in the most trouble. But it's also those thoughts that get us in the same trouble with people. Because we can look at people and we can go, they are this, that, or another. And that's bad thinking. you know, because that's not what God thinks about them. And so I mean, if you don't want to be, if you want to be have more joy, and if you want to have more peace, the most important thing you have to do is try to think like, what am I thinking? And when it's out of line, how do I bring it back in line with with what God's word says? And so I learned to start thinking about people that way. I started learning how to think about, and I don't always do well. I'm not 100%, but when my thinking starts going awry, it causes me anxiety, causes me depression, it causes me anger, and those kind of things. I go like, whoa, 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 Andre, you stop. That feeling that you have, and you know it's a feeling. Your body tells you you're feeling it. When you're frustrated, your body tells you you're frustrated. When you're mad, your body tells you whatever emotion you're having, your body tells you you're there. And that's an indication that you've just thought something in your mind that's inconsistent. And so I try to just always be mindful of that. So all audience, work on your thinking. Just work on your thinking. Make sure you're overthinking purely, rightly, and justly about yourself, about people, and you can literally stop some of the things that take you down a road or path that once you get there, it's hard to turn back.
Yeah, and how quickly we can go down those
Okay.
roads. Yeah. Well, Andre, again, thank you so much for your time today. I'm so grateful, so
Yeah,
thankful to have you here, and I look forward to chatting with you again, because I always um, learn something and grow personally in our conversations. And so, again, thank you on behalf of all those out there listening for just being transparent, vulnerable, and sharing from your life and your struggles, and how we can adopt this new growth mindset. It's not new, nothing's new under the sun, right? But
yeah,
it's just really taking what the world, I believe, has distorted,
that's right.
and really making it the way that God designed it. And it's
Absolutely.
seasonal growth
Yeah.
mindset. So
Zach, you couldn't have said it any better. You know, the way God designed it. Let's push for what God's designed.
yes, sir. Well,
Yeah.
God bless you. Thank you
All right.
again. And I'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate being on with you today.
Yes, sir.